So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts, I love talking about things, movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I am reviewing Materialists. So, let's get into it, shall we? Materialists is this new film coming out in about a week's time, so you may be wondering, how have you watched this already then? How are you reviewing this film? How have you watched it already? And the simple answer is, I was lucky enough to get to see this film at a preview screening. And when I had that opportunity to see this film at a preview screening, I jumped at the opportunity because I was interested in the film. I wouldn't say I was excited about seeing it, but I was interested in seeing it, as the film is written and directed by Celine Song. Now, if you're not familiar with who Celine Song is, a couple of years ago, she wrote and directed Past Lives, which are one of my favourite films of 2023. I think that's when it came out. I might be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure it came out in 2023. Yeah, that was one of my favourite films of that year. It surprised me so much, and I also saw that film at a preview screening. And when I heard that she was doing a more commercial film, you know, with the likes of Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans, they're quite literally the start of this movie. I was like, okay, that could be good. You have my interest. I'm not really a fan of Dakota Johnson. I've seen her in a couple of things which I thought she was good in. Like, I liked her in Bad Times at the El Royale. I liked her in Peanut Butter Falcon, but I can't really think of anything else that I've been particularly wowed by her in. But she's working with Celine Song. This might bring out a different, side to her as an actor. And I like Pedro Pascal, and I want to see Chris Evans do good stuff. Because, in my opinion, Chris Evans has not been in many good things outside of Knives Out. Most people know Chris Evans as Captain America. Personally, I'm not a fan of the MCU. But I know a lot of people are. Still, outside of the MCU, how many good things can you say Chris Evans has done? Knives Out, but he's part of a large cast in that film, so I was hoping to see him, properly shine in this movie. And I'm always a fan of Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal, I have not thought gave a bad performance in anything in the past, personally. So when I heard that those actors were attached to this movie, it got me interested. Again, I wasn't excited for this film. The trailer didn't make me excited, but I was curious about it. I was curious as to what kind of film it was going to be, because the trailers kind of marketed this film as it was going to be this sort of modern day rom-com in which Dakota Johnson has to choose between Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans, and that's kind of what the film is. But it's also, I thought the trailers were going to be misleading, and without going into too many details, they were misleading. So that's all I will say there. So yes, I went into the film last night with an open mind. And the Google plot synopsis for the film goes as follows. A young, ambitious New York City matchmaker, played by Dakota Johnson in this film, finds herself torn between the perfect match, played by Pedro Pascal, and her imperfect ex, played by Chris Evans. And that's pretty much all you need to know about the film before seeing it. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure if I like this film or not. I'm not really sure what I thought of it. What I will say is, I definitely didn't dislike watching it in the cinema. I liked many of the ideas that the film explored. Like, explores a lot of the ideas surrounding love and how people perceive love nowadays. How people perceive dating and how people have these idealistic ideas of a husband or a wife in their head. And how, we need to get away from those idealistic ideas. And it also explores the idea that, do we value materialistic goods? Do we value wealth over love? What do we value more? And how people might actually value wealth and idealistic goods and things like that over being in love. And I liked how I explored those ideas. I did think the performances were good, and that's saying something, because I'm not usually a fan of Dakota Johnson, as I said early on in this review, and yet I thought she was okay in the film. I mean, she didn't blow me away in the movie. I didn't go, well, now that is an actress I want. That is an actor I want to watch going forward. But I did like her in the film nonetheless, and I thought Pedro Pascal was great. He's in everything nowadays, isn't he? I'm pretty sure he's got a new movie coming out in the next couple of weeks, and he's been in Fantastic Four, and he's not long ago, he was in The Last of Us Season 2. I mean, not much in The Last of Us Season 2, but he was in The Last of Us Season 2 nonetheless. He's in everything nowadays, and he was actually really good in this film, although you could kind of tell that he wasn't on set for that much of the filming. because he's so busy. But yeah, I thought he was probably the standout performance in this movie. And Chris Evans was good. I didn't think he was great either. I didn't think he was great in this film, and I kind of wish I was saying he was great, but I liked him for what he was doing. I don't think he's given loads of material to work with. I don't think his character is a particularly interesting one, but yeah, Chris Evans is good in the film, and it's a beautifully shot film with some great needle drops in there. It's got a great and competent score by Daniel Pemberton too, and yeah, there's a lot that I liked about the film. It wasn't the film I expected it to be, and I liked that about it, because going into the film I was thinking, okay, if it does end up being the film I expect it to be, I'm really not going to be that interested in it, because the trailers gave off the idea that it was going to be Dakota Johnson choosing between Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans, and in the end, and at the end of the day, you know, so what? Who cares about Dakota Johnson choosing between Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans? Who cares about that? Because Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans are both good-looking guys, and yet, you know, the film was kind of it was building its premise all around that idea, and I didn't think it was that much of a compelling idea. But then the film wasn't really about that. I mean, yes, that is a significant plot point of the film, that Dakota Johnson's character has to choose between these two characters, but it's not really about that at the same time. It's not really about what you think it is going to be about. And I did think the film was grounded in verisimilitude. If you don't know what word means, look it up. I did think the film was grounded in verisimilitude, which made for a pretty engaging watch. Now, I will say that the film also, it didn't wow me. It didn't leave me feeling flawed the same way Past Lives did. Like, I remember coming out of the cinema after watching Past Lives, and I almost felt like my heart had been whipped out of my body, you know. It was just, there was a feeling that I couldn't quite get over. And I didn't get that with this film. And I think there are two reasons I didn't get that feeling with this movie. First of all, the chemistry between the actors isn't great. It feels like Celine Song was gifted these actors to work with and did the best she could, but it doesn't really feel like they have much chemistry. Like, we're meant to believe that Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans have this past and that they were once in love and might still be in love. But I didn't feel it whenever they were on screen together. And whilst with the two leads in Past Lives, I felt it. I remember watching Past Lives and I was like, okay, yeah, I still feel like these characters in love, even though maybe their chance has passed. Whilst with this movie, I was like, I'm not feeling these two characters have a strong connection or ever had a strong connection. I felt the same way with Pedro Pascal and Dakota Johnson in the film. I actually felt like they had more of a connection than Dakota Johnson and Chris Evans. But Dakota Johnson and Pedro Pascal, their connection wasn't great in the film either, and I was hoping for there to be more chemistry, more of that connection between these actors so you can fully believe in their relationships. And the second reason the film didn't floor me is because there's a hell of a lot of dialogue. Okay, there's not a hell of a lot of dialogue, actually. There's not a hell of a lot of dialogue. There's not a hell of a lot of dialogue, actually. I made it sound like it was going to be like an Aaron Sorkin film there. No, it's not. It's not an Aaron Sorkin film, which is just bombarded with brilliantly weird dialogue. I mean, the dialogue is well written in the film, but this is a more, in my opinion, dialogue-driven film than Celine Song's previous film, Past Lives. And the thing I liked about Past Lives so much is it did that thing so well of silence speaks volumes. When you get a filmmaker who properly understands that, it can work masterfully, and Celine Song did that beautifully and masterfully with her previous film. Whilst with this film, there were quite a few scenes when I sat there thinking, okay, if he didn't say anything in this scene, I actually think it might have turned out better. There were quite a few moments when it felt like it was trying to adhere to a mainstream audience. And in the end, that's what it's trying to do, you know. You don't cast these actors if you're not appealing to a mainstream audience. You just don't. Chris Evans, Pedro Pascal, Dakota Johnson, these are bankable stars. So yes, it's trying to appeal to a mainstream audience, but I was watching the film and quite a few scenes thinking, if we didn't say anything, and you just let the scene speak for itself, then I think this could have been a more, you know, sort of emotionally engaging moment or a more emotionally engaging scene. But I didn't get that, personally. And I did feel the film got quite mushy as well, particularly in its last half an hour to 40 minutes, which dragged. I'm not going to say where the film went in that last 40 minutes to half an hour, not at all, I'm not going into spoilers, but it went in a direction where, like, okay, you don't need to be spending as much time here as you are, in my opinion. Like, the film gets mushy, and it feels like it's trying to be, it feels like it's, without going into too many details, it feels like it's trying to have its typical rom-com ending. It feels like it's trying to eat its cake. It feels like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. You know, it wants to be critical of the rom-com love we've seen in films in the past. It wants to be critical of that idealistic love, but then you get to the end of the film and then it's almost like, okay, we're doing the rom-com thing as well. It doesn't quite work. And it does kind of, to me, feel like the mainstream version of Past Lives. You know, I do wonder what this would be like as a companion piece to Past Lives. You've watched Past Lives and this film back to back, because I do think they share a lot of similarities. You can tell that they're from the same filmmaker. But Past Lives, I feel, is better for not being mainstream like this film is. Like, this film, again, without going into too many spoilers, you can guess where this film's going from a mile away. I mean, like, I could guess where this film was going from a mile away. I could guess what was going to happen at the end of this film by the time that we were introduced to the characters in the film. We were introduced to all our main characters. I was like, okay, I can see where this is going. But at the same time, I forgot the point I'm making there. I think I was saying something on the lines of, I kind of felt like it was a more mainstream version of Past Lives. You know, it was like, what would happen if we made Past Lives to try, you know, Past Lives, again, without going into spoilers of Past Lives in case people haven't seen that movie, at the end of Past Lives, it has a very bittersweet ending, a very sad ending, actually. And at the end of this film, the ending isn't really sad, it's more lovey-dovey. So I didn't love that either. So again, I'm not sure how I totally feel about the film. I'm not sure if I liked it or not, in all honesty. But what I will say is I definitely liked part of it. I definitely wasn't unengaged by this film. And I watched it and it passed the time and it didn't bore me. You know, I've heard some people call this film dull because it's already open in America. So I have heard some people call this film dull, and it said it went on and there wasn't really much to it. I disagree. I think there's a subplot to the film which adds a lot of weight to the film, which if you didn't have that in there wouldn't have been the film wouldn't have had nearly as much weight as it did. And I do feel that the film asks some interesting questions surrounding the whole idea of quote unquote perfect love. But at the same time, I feel the film needed better. I feel that the actors needed better chemistry with one another. I feel that the last half an hour of the film got mushy and was a bit cliche. And I did feel like it was trying to appeal to a mainstream audience as well, which is understandable with the stars you have in this film. But personally, I prefer the Past Lives kind of ending. I didn't love the direction this film took. I thought it was going to take a different direction about half an hour towards the end, but then it went in the direction I thought it was. But then it went in the cliche direction. I was like, okay, I don't care about this nearly as much. Still, it was worth seeing. Maybe not worth seeing in the cinema, but it was worth seeing nonetheless. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that, I almost said Past Lives there, I'm going to say that Materialists, I'm going to say it's a 7 out of 10. I may very well change my rating in a couple of months if I were to re-review this movie, which I probably won't do, but if I were to talk more about this movie, I may be a lot more critical about it in the forthcoming weeks to months. But as of now, I still lean on the side of liking this film. That's what I feel like. I feel like I enjoyed this movie and I liked it for what it was, but at the same time, I can completely see why somebody else wouldn't like this movie and it wouldn't work for them, and they would almost feel tricked because, again, the film is marketing itself as this sort of rom-com. Oh, who's Dakota Johnson going to pick? Pedro Pascal or Chris Evans? And again, there is a bit of that in the film, but it's not really about that. It's about other stuff, and I don't think there is a lot of com in the rom-com of this. There's more rom, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a loads of comedy. There is some comedy in the film, particularly surrounding Pedro Pascal, which works, but I think the film is more focused on the rom, the romance of it all. And that's where it lost me a bit too, as I didn't feel a strong connection between any of these characters, and it did get a bit mushy. Still, it was different than what I expected. It's a mainstream version of Past Lives, one could argue, as I've argued in this review. However, it is still not your typical rom-com, and Celine Song has cemented herself as an interesting filmmaker with this film still, if that makes sense. I'm not sure how much I'm making sense right now because I only got like 5 hours sleep last night, but yeah, Celine Song has maintained that she's an interesting filmmaker to watch out for. Whatever she does next, I will be interested. There's a rumour out there, or is it confirmed actually, I think it might be official, that she is writing My Best Friend's Wedding sequel, and I'm like, wow, that's a choice, so I'm interested to see what she does with that. Apparently she's not directing the film, but still, I'm interested to see what she does there. Nevertheless, as I've already said with this film today, I'm not quite sure if I liked it or not. I'm still not quite sure, but I think I liked it. I liked what it was really about, and again, it was worth the watch. Maybe not worth the watch in the cinema, but it's not your typical quote-unquote rom-com. And I kind of like that about it. I mean, I didn't kind of like that about it. I like that about it quite a bit. I'm just not sure if the whole film worked, though. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I was going to say once more in this podcast today, Materialists is a 7 out of 10, at least for now, from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Materialists, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts and many more videos coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.